And do roll call. And what we're going to do for staff is have you go around the table to please say your name and who you're with. And we'll start with Daniel over here to my left. Go ahead and say who you are and your business.
Sorry, I couldn't see behind you.
It's okay.
Manager. Hey, hi, I'm Daniel Brannick, and I'm representing District 1.
Joe White, Jackson CDC, District 5.
Don Simmons, District 3, Fresno State.
Keith Bergthal, District 7.
Nick Jovino, District 5.
Sal Gonzalez, Lance Cashin and Company, and Mr. Carvasi, C.
District, yeah. Yep. Carrie Catalano representing the mayor's office.
Wayne Rutledge, Mayor's Office.
Darius Assemi, Granville Homes, District 12-6.
12 minus.
Jeff Roberts for District 4.
Mariah Thompson, National Lawyers Guild, District 1.
Gary Janetta, Civil Engineer, District 2.
Grecia Lenis, Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability, District 3.
Josh Peterson, Watham Tristados Homes, District 6.
Great. I want to thank everybody for being here today, including the members of the community. Thank you very much. The committee's role was to read Chapter 1, which was the introduction, and Chapter 2. It was amazing reading. I'd like to thank the staff for all the work that they did on the general plan. And then what we'd like to do is to remind folks that a couple housekeeping items before we get into the presentations. Do not forget to fill out your 700 forms, or due. And if you have, as a reminder, the future meeting dates during the days from 9 to 11. That was what was done on the doodle poll, so want to remind you about that. 9 to 11 on those dates that were and times that were to be determined. So we'll get that schedule out to you updated. I'd like to turn over the rest of the meeting, number 2, to staff presentations. Thank you, Drew.
Good evening. How are you guys doing this evening? My name is Drew Wilson. I'm with the Planning and Development Department. Good evening, committee. This is our first substantial meeting to have a discussion, and I will be your first presenter. I'm going to focus on 2 elements and leave the third for our subject matter experts. The 2 chapters I will be giving a summary of are the introduction, Chapter 1, and Chapter 2, the Economic Development and Fiscal Sustainability chapter. We're going to start with Chapter 1. So Chapter 1, as it states, is an introduction, and it lays out the foundation for the general plan. It provides a history of the growth of Fresno, a summary of how the plan was developed, and the goals that guide the general plan. In order to get a general plan, there was an extensive engagement process. This was referenced in the plan. There were over 160 stakeholder interviews, 100 presentations to neighborhood associations and other agencies, 15 community workshops, 7 planning commission presentations, General Plan Citizens Advisory Committee, which met 24 times, numerous presentations to other commissions and committees. There was a bilingual newsletter and a phone survey conducted. There was a website that housed all the information and material that was discussed, as well as consistent email updates throughout the process. So in order to outline what the general plan is, I'm going to allow the general plan to introduce itself. The Fresno General Plan is a forward-looking, comprehensive, and long-range document. The primary purpose of a general plan is to outline a long-range vision for the physical development of the city that reflects the aspirations of the community. So the general plan has a lot of consistent themes throughout. In the introduction, it identifies some of the foundational elements that are continued to be woven throughout the document and where they came from. A lot of those came from community concerns. So the majority of the concerns that were felt through the outreach process and identified were the high concentration of poverty and high unemployment, extreme disparities in quality of life circumstances, neglected and disadvantaged established neighborhoods, and the downtown planning area, poor air quality and environmental and community health issues, residential growth patterns that negatively impact the natural resources, and depleted strategic farmland, and fiscal instability related to the city's existing spread out urban form and land use insufficiencies. So there's some principles to address these, and these all lay into the general goals, which I'll get into at the end portion of the first chapter. So to ensure that there's quality of life and basic services in all neighborhood, a prosperous city centered on a vibrant downtown, ample industrial and employment land ready for job creation, care for the built and natural environment, and fiscal responsibility and sustainability, land use policies, and practices. So there's, as I mentioned, some themes that run throughout the document and are identified at the very beginning of the plan and the introduction. One of those themes is the balanced city approach. So appropriate portions of its growth and reinvestment focused in the central core, downtown established neighborhoods, and along BRT, the bus rapid transit corridors. Balancing a vibrant downtown will be a self-sufficient suburban development areas. So that's the roughly half conversation that came up, roughly half of the development to occur in the incorporated areas and the other half to occur in the unincorporated areas. So a result of that is that these three support each other. A revitalized downtown, investing in established neighborhoods, and livable new suburban neighborhoods. So there's two plan horizons that are discussed in the plan and introduced in the beginning. There's the general plan horizon, which goes through 2035, and there's the general plan build out. So the idea was that the general plan wasn't going to meet its full build out till after the horizon of 2035, and that goes until roughly 2050. For more information, again, you can reference the introduction chapter. So now I'm going to go into the goals. The goals are the foundation, the guiding principles for the document. They create the consistency for the document. And as I'm going to address in the next chapter, one or several of them are referenced at the beginning of each chapters thereafter. So goal number 1 is increased opportunity, economic development, business, and job creation. Goal number 2, support a successful and competitive downtown. Goal 3, emphasize conservation, successful adaptation to climate and changing resource conditions, and performance effectiveness in the use of energy, water, land, building, natural resources, and fiscal resources required for the long-term stability of Fresno. Goal 4, emphasize achieving healthy air quality and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Goal 5, support agriculture and food production as an integral industry. Goal 6, protect, preserve, and enhance natural, historic, and cultural resources. Goal 7, provide for a diversity of districts, neighborhoods, housing types, including affordable housing, residential densities, job opportunities, recreation, open space, and education venues that appeal to a broad range of people throughout the city. Goal 8, develop complete neighborhoods and districts with an effective and diverse mix of residential densities, building types, and affordability, which are designed to be healthy, attractive, and centered by schools, parks, and public and commercial services to provide a sense of place and that provide as many services as possible within walking distance. Goal 9, promote a city of healthy communities and improve quality of life in established neighborhoods. Goal 10, emphasize increased land use intensities and mixed-use development at densities supportive of greater uses of transit in Fresno. Goal 11, emphasize and plan for all modes of travel on local and major streets in Fresno. Goal 12, resolve existing public infrastructure and service deficiencies, make full use of existing infrastructure, and invest in improvements to increase competitiveness and promote economic growth. Goal 13, emphasize the city as a role model for good growth management planning, effective processing and permit streamlining, effective urban development policies, environmental quality, and a strong economy. Work collaboratively with other jurisdictions and institutions to further these values throughout the region. Goal 14, provide a network of well-maintained parks, open space, athletic fields, and walking and biking trails connected the city's districts and neighborhoods to attract and retain a broad range of individuals, benefit the health of residents, and provide the level of public amenities required to encourage and support development of higher density urban living and transit use. Improve Fresno's visual image and enhance its form and function through urban design strategies and effective maintenance. We're almost there. Goal 16, protect and improve public health and safety. And goal 17, recognize, respect, and plan for Fresno's cultural, social, and ethnic diversity and foster an informed and engaged citizenry. So that's our foundation, folks. It's the core of the first chapter, provides us an output, but also these are going to be the goals that create consistency. That consistency comes from, as those who were in attendance at the first meeting, requirements from the Office of Planning and Research. So as was identified by the representative from the state of California, the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, there's requirements, all of which you guys got a digital copy of. Those guidelines state that the general plan must be comprehensive. So we need to get into detail. That's with our objectives and policies. The plan must be internally consistent. So we have to be consistent throughout. There can't be elements that cross each other out. And the goals are which keeps the consistency throughout the document. And the plan must be long range. Again, that goes back to our long-term horizon, the 2035 with a full build out to 2050. And there's 7 elements required. You guys ready for chapter 2? I know this presentation is riveting, right? But if you, what's that? Chair?
Please.
Mr. Chairman?
Please.
I have one basic question. With each of those 17 goals that you outlined, I think 12 of them, there's some extra commentary that's at the bottom of that. You didn't read that.
Correct.
Does that commentary have the same official standing as the goal itself, or is that like an editorial comment that was made 5 years ago?
No, it's commentary.
Okay. Thank you.
Please. All right.
Hi, thank you.
Yep.
I think my question actually gets to a more foundational question about this process that I have. I read the introduction and I read the goals, and they all seem like great goals, but I am left with the question of whether the goals have changed, whether or not they have been implemented, and sort of essentially why are we here, and how are we to make that determination? Because one of the things that I notice is that we haven't been provided with information about implementation of these goals or policies from which to make a determination about whether these goals are being met. So my understanding of this committee is that we are supposed to be evaluating the implementation and making recommendations about what the city should do going forward. But I'm confused about how we are supposed to do that. And I'm curious as to whether the reason we're doing that is because some of these goals have changed, or otherwise why.
So your third question will more than likely be answered with the first two. One, they have not changed. And the implementation, the information that you will receive are going to be from our subject matter experts. So staff will give you a brief presentation at the beginning of each meeting, giving a summary of each one of the chapters. At the end of the staff's presentation, we'll have subject matter experts come and speak to what implementation has been done to those objectives and policies. And then from that point, it'll be your guys' chance to have a discussion on what implementation has been done, and the long-term objective of the goal, or of the committee, as identified in the resolution, is to create recommendations to the city council.
Okay, great, thank you.
Anybody else? Patience, please. You might need, is your mic on?
So I apologize for being late.
You're right on time.
There we go. Thank you. Mariah's question dovetails exactly with mine. I would, since we are tasked with discussing the progress toward implementing the policies of the general plan, and a lot of that is going to be, were the assumptions on which the general plan was created, did they turn out to be accurate? How have we done how have we performed? How many units of housing have we built? What's our population now as compared to what it was expected to be? All those kinds of things. I hope someone's not going to stand at the front of the room and read me numbers, because I'm not going to absorb them. But if that information is available, then I would think it would be distributed to us, and it would be really, as I read these chapters, I'm like, gosh, but I've got 1,000 questions that are not conceptual. They're just like, how are we doing on this? So my hope is that we could actually get that data about how we're doing, and then we can have the conversation about, is this the right general plan, or should we make recommendations about changing it? So I guess I'm seconding Mariah's point.
So to address the data concerns, as was mentioned at the beginning of the process, we don't have a consultant. And we do anticipate there are going to be data requests throughout the entire process. So our plan at the moment is, as the data requests come in, accompanied with our current workload, we'll get answers back to the committee, and we'll provide that to you when they're available. The goal or the structure of the committee, as identified in the procedures, is that there will be a discussion after staff's presentation, subject matter experts' presentations of potential recommendations or changes or requests for the general plan. Those will all go in the hopper, as we're calling it. And just like a budgetary cycle, at the very end of all the meetings, after there's been a discussion on each chapter, then you as a group will have to decide which one of those elements that are in the hopper, whether it's a change of policies or any other suggestions, move forward or not.
So, my apologies, but that seems a little haphazard, and I'm concerned. I understand there's no consultant. I'm assuming that means there's no budget for this particular project. And it is not, I know you know this, but I'm just going to say it out loud. It isn't reasonable for us to have conversations conceptually about whether this is a good general plan or whether we should make changes unless we've actually been able, I mean, I would have wanted to sit down with these chapters and look at, like, here's a status report on, do we have public serving, are there incentives for public serving businesses, or really have we focused on industrial export-oriented businesses for incentives? And how much money has gone into that? And what is the multiplier effect? And, you know, all this information that really will tell us, is this a good plan or not?
I think that's great points, and that's where the subject matter experts come. So we've divided the presentation into two sections. Staff gives you an introduction to what's in the plan, and then the subject matter experts speak to any implementation that's happened for the key objectives and policies in that plan. And the data request that we had, yes, it would be nice to sit down, but that's one of the reasons we came up with the worksheets. The idea of the worksheets is that once we have those data requests, you can go back and cross-reference your notes, any questions you had, so when the conversation comes back around at the end of the process, we at least have a history of all the thoughts and opinions that went on throughout the process.
So just a point of clarification for the committee. I have talked to the mayor. This is a unique process for all of us. Sometimes we want to there's been some conversations about putting our concerns all on the table. The administration has asked us to be patient through the process. I also want to recommend that as you're reading the chapters that you formulate your questions like I did last night. I sent them to staff. We do get homework. We have a 2-week period. I do want you to do your homework. Feel free to read ahead. And please submit those questions to staff and copy me, because the more questions we have in advance or concerns you might have, staff will be better prepared. But I do agree with Mariah and Patience. We don't know, and we're going to hopefully figure out as we get through each chapter. So thank you, Patience and Mariah, for your questions, and I do think we need to take note of those for future presentations. You had a question?
Yeah, I just have one question. It mentions in the literature that there's been periodic reviews, or was there supposed to be periodic reviews?
Yes.
I think some of them were every year, every couple of years. Will those be presented with the subject matter information?
That was a question of mine, and I think Jennifer could respond to that, right?
Thank you. So the general plan does call for regular updates, annual updates to the city council. So the first update was provided to the City Council in December of 2016. So at the end of the second year, there was a PowerPoint presentation provided by the Mayor's Office to the City Council, and we can provide that to you. At the end of the third year, there was a comprehensive report that was provided to the City Council, and it outlined in the back, it follows the same format that in the implementation chapter has all of the policies grouped and who's responsible and when they will be done, and that was provided to the City Council. And typically, the annual report is provided about 3 months after the end of that of that calendar year, just due to the volume of information. And then last year, there were changes to the housing element annual report, and it literally took 2 staff members full-time for no more than 3 months to complete, and we were not able to complete the annual report. However, we're in the process of completing the 5th year annual report right now. We have all the data in from the departments, and as we go through this, we will refine that because they're reporting on each of these individual policies. So every policy that you see up here will be reported on by the individual subject matter experts. So they're out of the last 5 years, there have been 3 completed annual reports, and there's 1 being completed right now.
Thank you.
I'll come right back. Do you mind if I go to Josh first, or is it related to, for Jennifer? Okay, please, Mariah.
So I actually submitted a question about whether or not the city had annual reports to staff, and I was told that they did not do general plan annual reports. So I was hoping to get a hold of some of those in advance, but I was told that they didn't exist. So you're saying they do exist and we can get copies of them?
So yes, we can provide those to the committee, and again, so we're trying to accumulate right now the full 5 years. Where are we at full 5 years? So each of these weeks that you're coming in your meeting, you're seeing the full 5 years of each of these chapters. We want to make sure that that report is comprehensive, the current report, but the past reports are available.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So, so we're going to email that out to the committee, so.
It'll get posted on the website.
What's that?
It will be posted on this committee's website.
Okay, got it, thank
And
you.
I'll send a reminder email when it's been posted.
All right, appreciate, Josh?
So I actually agree with Patience. And, I'm sorry, what was your name? Mariah. Mariah. The goals look consistent, and I think that we can all agree it's the methodology that may not be appropriate on how to achieve those goals. And so, 1, how are we doing to achieve those goals? What's the data? But 2, do we have benchmarks that the city's going to provide? Fresno is not in a vacuum. You have neighbors that through this 5-year period have had their own general plan and potentially affected how Fresno has grown. Have we lost economic growth to competitive neighbors where the implementation or the methodology of Fresno's general plan could have been different to achieve a better result? And so I was just wondering if staff was going to look at Fresno in a vacuum, or if it was going to analyze and provide data for surrounding neighbors to see how others have performed with their methodology and their own general plans.
I got it. It's on the list. Yep, we'll put it on the list. If you have a specific data request, I would say make that data request. The task at hand right now is to review the Fresno general plan. If you want, I'm not saying we're going to live in a vacuum, but if you would like to have additional numbers, make that data request, and when and if we're able to fill it, we will. And we'll
I'm just curious, as you have a surrounding area that's pretty dense with, just say Clovis, and you look at job formations, housing formations, some of the data that you had. One of the big topics today is VMTs and vehicle miles traveled. Where are those job formations? Where are the housing formations? That affects air quality. It affects greenhouse gases. I don't think you can look at this general plan in isolation. I think we need to look at how our neighbors are competing against Fresno and how to make ourselves more competitive. I mean, that's a high interest to me. Because if you don't analyze that and you continue to be ineffective in your own methodology, growth is going to go somewhere else, whether that's jobs or homes, school districts, expansions, et cetera. So.
Okay, so real quick, so I'm not stifling conversation. I do want to acknowledge that we did agree to a process that was presented at the last meeting. I would still recommend that we submit questions and inquiries a little bit in advance of the meeting so staff could be adequately prepared for the conversation. And I also know, as a person that went through the general plan development, sitting on the Planning Commission, some of my colleagues sat through numerous meetings. It's a document that did not make everybody 100% happy, is that correct? But it was probably one of the largest substantial piece of public policy that transformed the way that we operate. It's not perfect, so we're here today in the next 4 or 5 months to kind of go through it bit by bit and to see where recommendations could be made, where changes need to be done and what information we need. I think on key data that we need to make some solid decision, I know that we don't have a consultant, but if we can't come to healthy conclusions on recommendation, that's going to create a bottleneck toward the end. And so the administration and the council will be expecting us to make recommendations. That is our charge. But if we can't make them because we don't get the data, we'll know that really quickly. So I want to make sure we get into chapter 2. Let's hear what our expert folks have to say, but I know that you had a question, so I want to be able to honor that.
Can I quickly address
Yeah.
Josh's? So
Okay.
I'm not trying to not answer the question. We have a charge, as Carrie suggested, and that's to be the convener of the committee. It's the committee's job now to discuss the merits of the general plan and the policies. If that would be a sidebar, unprofessional, anecdotal conversation for me to answer with any form of opinion. So I want to present you guys with facts and then allow you guys to have a conversation. Is that all right?
Correct. What I'm doing is I'm looking at Fresno as a business, just like I'm looking at surrounding communities. And my charge, I feel my charge here is how do I make this business more successful? Well, some of the things that I have to do is look at other businesses and what they're doing. And so I'm asking, is that going to be a part of this, or are we just working in a vacuum?
So I would
Because
recommend that you...
as Patient said, how are we doing? I'm just curious, how did our neighbors do in those 5 years as well? What did we lose due to other communities? That's the only question.
Well, I think, so for clarification, back to the general plan conversation, when we looked at the creation of it, we didn't just look at Fresno as Fresno, we looked at our region. We looked at implications of what would happen if we did this and we did that. There were various options that were presented. Council made option A with some modifications. We did take into consideration Clovis, Sanger, surrounding Madera. We knew there might be some leapfrogging to other communities because of our policy. However, that's why we're here today, is to see where we need to make some adjustments, because we recognize that the business climate has changed, the market trends have changed, and so we need to see if our policy are contradicting current market trends, because the administration, the council say, hey, we do want to be smart about growth. We don't want to push our businesses to other jurisdictions, but at the same time, we can't repeat 60 years of the way we did. So that's why we're here for the next 4 to 6 months. But I do hear you, so we need to make sure we take that in. Yes, ma'am.
I just had
Isn't working.
had a quick clarifying question, I think more so for myself as I'm reviewing the chapters.
Please.
And I think kind of adheres to what Mariah and Patience mentioned as far as like why we are here. So, to what extent are we actually like following the housing element program that actually, initially established or was supposed to have established this implementation committee beginning in 2017, which has pretty, clear language as to, having a diverse stakeholder group involved in reviewing progress on the priorities established in the general plan to invest in older and established disadvantaged neighborhoods and continue to refine and review those city policies. So would it be appropriate for myself and I guess others to kind of adhere to what's in that housing element plan, which we also, should be in compliance in as well?
It's a chapter,
That's-
correct?
So, yeah, I would say that's a question that, you're going to want to write down and bring up in the housing element.
Yeah.
May 26th, if there's elements of that you want to discuss with the committee, then when you guys have your discussion period, that'd be the good time to bring it up.
Okay.
Can I ask
But
a question? Yeah, please,
Yeah.
go
I was going
ahead.
to say, but it refers to the general plan as a whole, not just the housing element section. But it is an element within the housing, like it is a program within the housing element, but it does refer to it as a whole, like making sure that the general plan, this whole giant book, not just one element, is being implemented and to what extent.
So I think as we go through this process, there's going to be multi-level layers to every single chapter of conversation, right? And so it's going to be to the committee to dictate to what level and what layer you're going to go to and how you're going to connect them. So
Okay. I'm not sure that your answer.
I don't think it was.
Okay.
I don't want to dictate the conversation.
I think she's wanting to know, we have two public policy documents and the general plan and the housing element. The housing element's an important component, right?
It's a chapter within the
It is
Yeah.
a chapter
It's a
of
chapter
the
in the
general
book,
plan.
yeah.
It will be reviewed by this committee.
Correct.
It is scheduled for review on May 26th. That is a policy, and it will be discussed at that evening. It is up to the chair if he would like to entertain discussions of other chapters, but I would say, looking at that document, you're going to be hard pressed to discuss more than one chapter per meeting
Correct.
and to come to any kind of conversation.
And I'm not trying to jump around chapters, I'm trying to kind of just set my mind as I'm reviewing this, like, what is our purpose? Because right now it's kind of like, oh, we're reading it and providing recommendations, but is it with the
I would
intent of
recommend,
that?
let's get through one presentation
Yep.
and figure out what we're doing first before we,
Okay.
and then at the end of that presentation, and we say, gosh, we didn't talk at all about implementation of any of the policies in that chapter, then maybe we have a different conversation. But right now, I think what we're trying to do is to break this into manageable pieces. Let's talk about this chapter. Let's figure out whether or not the policies have been implemented or in the process or going to be implemented. We're in the first 5 years of a 20-year horizon. Are we getting there or are we not getting there?
Yep.
And then after that, you can have a conversation about what additional data, what additional information is needed. But again, as Drew stated, we are here to present the information, the facts as they are. Here's what it says in the general plan, here's what we've done. And then it's up to the committee to say, we want to recommend a change in goals, a change in policy, a change in methodology, whatever that is, it is up to the committee to determine. We are neutral, and I want to make that very clear. As staff, we are neutral. We're presenting, here are the policies in each chapter, and here's what's been accomplished.
Sounds good. And I think this is all good clarification points, Jennifer, because the last meeting was the introductory meeting. This is the first work meeting. So we're going to go ahead and jump into chapter 2, and then we're going to go ahead and hear from staff and the subject matter experts, and then we'll go from there. Fair enough, everybody? All right, let's move.
All right. This is more entertaining than the State of the Union. All right, Chapter 2, Economic Development and Fiscal Sustainability. So again, I'm going to let this chapter introduce itself. So the outcomes of many other general plan initiatives is tied to the city's economic success. This element focuses on improving the business climate, retaining local businesses, developing a high-skilled labor force, attracting new industries, supporting the tax base, and sustaining the city's ability to provide public services for current and future residents. Again, consistency. At the beginning of every chapter, it speaks of the one or multiple goals it's related to that were identified in Chapter 1, the introduction. The two goals that are identified as its relations here are the General Plan Goal Number 1 and Goal 12. 1, increase opportunity, economic development, business and job creation. And 12, resolve existing public infrastructure and service deficiencies, make full use of existing infrastructure, and invest in improvements to increase competitive and promote economic growth. So the chapter identifies some key economic factors of the conditions of Fresno at the time. That time when the general plan was drafted, Fresno had a poverty rate twice as high as the state of California and 40% higher than Fresno County. It had low level of educational attainment. So fewer than 6% of the labor force were holding graduate or professional degrees. The labor force with bachelor's degrees at the time was about 2/3 the state average. And a quarter of the city's labor force never graduated from high school. That's 25% higher than the state's percentage. So these directly affect economic development. Our labor force, as identified, was a contributing factor to Fresno's declining labor force appearance to be a mismatch between available jobs and the skills of the available labor force. So the skills gap, as it stated in the general plan. The Fresno area is an economic or educational capital of the central San Joaquin Valley. Key institutions are doing a significant amount to address the recent skill gap issue. Again, those will go in more detail from our subject matter experts. It also identified the direct and indirect employment in production, agriculture, and finished food products remains the economic base of the San Joaquin Valley. So this goes into our core base, and it's one of the main economic drivers. Again, we're the breadbasket, and we're producing the region and the county in a critical area for the nation and the world's food supply. So as one of the elements or key themes that was identified in the first chapter, balance is key to this document and instrumental in the connection between this chapter and several other chapters to achieve the goals of the general plan. So The balance that were suggested within the narrative of this chapter is the growth potential for Fresno major employment sectors was an important economic factor used for the programming of the land use. So this is establishing those connections and consistency. The real estate market's ability to support all economic sectors is important, as well as the fiscal impact of land uses on the city's budgetary ability to maintain high levels of services and overall quality of life for residents. Quality of life seems to be another one of those themes that's weaved throughout. And Fresno must seek to diversify its economic base into other sectors to meet job creation goals, keep revenue local, and fully serve the population. Again, this goes into the skills gap. There was a study in 2012 where people were surveyed to identify some key obstacles for economic opportunities. Those were identified as market conditions, labor availability, regulatory constraints, and cost of doing business. Again, these two elements here go into the objectives and policies, which I'll go into next. So some of the opportunities identified in the general plan was providing for professional services, so creating high-paying jobs. So supporting traditional, which is the agriculture and emerging industries such as tech, so Bitwise would be one, downtown revitalization, making sure we have an economic development plan, fiscal responsibility, and understanding the link between land use, fiscal conditions, and residents' quality of life. So now I'm going to go over the 5 objectives from the general plan for economic development and fiscal sustainability. I'm not going to go into grave detail. I'm just going to read you guys what the objective is. Sound good? Objective 1, support economic development by maintaining a strong working relationship with the business community, improving the business climate for current and future businesses. Identifies several policies there. Objective 2, support local businesses, startups, and encourage innovation by improving access to resources and capital and help overcome obstacles hampering economic development. Objective 3, attract and recruit businesses and offer incentives for economic development. Objective 4, cultivate a skilled, educated, and well-trained workforce for increasing educational attainment and the relevant job skill levels in order to appeal to local and non-local businesses. And lastly, objective 5, achieve fiscal sustainability. So I do have some information we got from our Office of Budget and Finance. I got a couple of slides here that I'm going to go over. Staff from that department is here to answer questions if you guys have any during the discussion period, and then I'm going to hand the presentation off. So the city's revenues increased $142.8 million, 20% since the fiscal year 2014 adoption of the general plan. The top 3 general fund revenue generators: property tax, sales tax, and charges for services. Personnel costs, as identified in the general plan, still are the largest expenditure at 74%. Governmental funds and businesses type funds have positive unrestricted fund balance since fiscal year 2017. Assessed values in the city limits increased $8.4 billion, 29.8 since the adoption of the general plan, and the per capita income increased roughly $7,000, 18% from $36,000 to $43,000. The major employers in its first year of operation, Amazon became and remains one of the top 10 largest employers in Fresno. Ulta Beauty is now one of the biggest contributors of sales tax revenue to the city's general fund. Some major infrastructure improvements: surface water treatment plant, it's $422 million, and the bus rapid transit system, the city paid $18.3. It was over a $50 million project. And some budget updates: $42 million of debt service savings through 2014 by refinancing the general fund backed debt, $13 million additional annual fee, free cash flow from sewer funds through fiscal year by deference of sewer bonds. I have no idea what that means. Defeasance. Increasing in credit rating. We paid it off. I like that. Our credit rating went from a B to an A. Everybody likes a good credit score, right? And that's the end of my presentation. I'm going to now hand it over. She has a variety of titles. She's our Economic Development Director.
Drew, before you go, I think it's important for clarification back on the general fund. We saw an increase of $143 million to the general fund. I think that number we have to be very careful about because it's more of a catch-up from the recession, correct? It's not that we had $142 extra million. It was catch-up from the depth of the recession. Is that correct? Because I don't want people to think. So maybe Because I don't know, I don't want people to think that's
We'll
actually,
put that in the parking lot?
we could put it in
and
the,
when- and when
well,
we
okay.
come-
All right, that sounds,
And when,
I just want people to know that, no, we're not flush with cash, right? Because that's not true. So, all right.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to
Please.
ask a question for
Please.
clarification.
Yep.
The $143 million, clearly that's not per annum. That's got to be the aggregate as of the adoption of the general plan to when? To the end of the fiscal year, the last year?
yes, through fiscal year 20.
Okay, so then it's, I'm going to assume that there's probably a buildup from, say, in 14, then 15, there's probably okay, all right, thank you.
Any other clarifying questions on the presentation? Thank you, Drew.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Sal.
My water here, way down. Thank you, Drew. So I'm glad to see familiar faces around here, and first off, I wanted to start off by thanking all of you for coming, for your commitment to serve on this committee. I know the mayor, the city council members, and staff really appreciates your dedication and time. Okay? So currently, and I wanted to introduce my team and just explain so that you realize how large our team is. So my team consists of myself and Kelly Trevino, who's our economic development analyst, and she's sitting over there. And then recently, we were able to work with the Fuse Fellows to select a gal to come and help us with our Opportunity Zone program, and that's Claire Widmer. And then we also get to utilize Yahira Figueroa from the planning department, so she helps us, and she focuses on throughout the city economic development as well. And then, of course, I couldn't do this job by myself, and so we contract with the Fresno Economic Development Corporation to help us out with a lot of economic development, and that's Leanne Eagers here. And she can help answer some questions, and she does a great job and helps us out tremendously. So with that said, I'll go forward, and it's not coming up very well. So as Drew went over some of the slides and the objectives, the goal for...
I'm sorry, real quick. Can we just fix that for everybody?
I think it's coming too wide, yeah.
I hope everybody brought their glasses. All righty.
So the goal for Objective 1 is to support economic development by maintaining a strong working relationship with the businesses community and improving business climate for the current and future businesses. So here, our goal has been to continue that. We do have established a strong network. I just mentioned Leanne Eagers, and we work together closely to reach out to businesses and hopefully for business attraction and to come to Fresno. On the next slide, here's a list of our partners that we work with really hard with. So again, economic development. We work closely in the past year with the Inland California Rising and Valley to Valley Initiative, which is taking a group of people up to the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, and present ourselves to businesses over there, and with the effort of hopefully getting them to come and relocate to Fresno. Downtown Fresno Partnership is what we consider an arm that helps us with the promotion of the downtown and services and trying to get some of those properties filled and built upon. And then GoBos is our government partner for the state. And then workforce development, they're helping us to train folks so that they can get upskilled and find jobs for the businesses that are coming here. The Manufacturing Alliance is another company that we work, or organization that we work really close with the manufacturers here in Fresno, and helping them to also look to get some of their existing employees trained, as well as new ones when they're looking to fill the job. So upskilling and moving some of their employees up and get paid higher wages. And then there's a list of others that some of you will know about. And then, of course, there's St. Rest, Fresno Metro Ministries, who works really close with us. And then there's a few others there. Okay? And then for funding, again, here's a few examples of funding programs that are currently available and representation of what we do in the community. So some of you have taken advantage of the, and know about the Transformative Climate Communities program that the city was able to get, along with a few other partners, to make some improvements throughout the city. And then again, there's Measure C, which is not done by the city, but we help put it together, and it's helped a few of our developments in downtown housing developments to help increase that housing stock over there. And then we participated in the California Economic Summit that passed this, that was held this past November, and we've begun hosting job fairs. We've had one this past year, and it was along with the EDC folks, and we had it over at Orange School, and it was really successful. We had 17 businesses, Amazon, Ulta, and a few other manufacturing companies, and we had over 700 people show up to that. So it turned out real well. We were actually trying to get, and I think some of us were able to track that a lot of the people that showed up there were from the South industrial area, so that was really good. Let's see. So then I'm going to have Leanne come over.
So good evening. I'm Leanne Eager, President and CEO of Fresno County Economic Development Corporation, and we've been working very closely with the city on ensuring that the goals in the master plan are being met. So some of the things that we have been doing with the city of Fresno, we market the city throughout the state, throughout the country, throughout the world to talk about what we have here and bringing new businesses here. We're looking at marketing the industrial parks, even though there are very few. But we're certainly out there looking at how do we get businesses into those parks. Right now, I think from an industrial standpoint, we're less than 2% vacancy rate, so I don't have a lot of things to sell out around the world, but we're certainly doing that. As I said, we're attracting, retaining, and expanding industrial and value-added manufacturing. You know, one of the things, I think I heard a question earlier about, is this just about industrial? And no, it's not just about industrial. One of the things, and I know I'm skipping ahead here because I'm never good at following these, is that from at this EDC now, we go back to data. We don't just look at, gee, here's the direction we're going in at the city of Fresno, and it's always been, let's try to get industrial businesses here. We hired an economist on staff now. We are hiring another one next week. And what they're looking at is, what are those businesses that are compatible with the city of Fresno? What are those businesses that we should be attracting? And we're doing actual targeted marketing. We're not standing there like the old way of economic development and hope someone comes and, you know, as you're standing at a booth, right, and they come and say, who are you, and I really want to be there. That never happens, just so you know. You do have to do targeted marketing now, and you do have to do it based on data. And so that's what we're doing. We get those leads, we communicate those to the city. We make sure that when those companies say we're interested in the city of Fresno, but here's all the things that we need, we turn those over to Lupe and her team. She puts that together and we sell it. The expansion and retention plan, we have put together that plan also. So it's not just for attraction, we have current businesses, they're on the cusp of growing, and thank heavens now that's the case, because for some of you who know, I started at the EDC in 2009, and right smack dab in the middle of that recession. I was an attorney, so I went from the frying pan into the fire. And at that time, it was really just working with the city and making sure that we kept our businesses alive. That's all we were doing. We weren't really attracting too many. We weren't expanding too many. What do we can do to keep people alive? So that's what we've been doing. We've been looking at the expansion retention plan. So in that data collection, what we've been doing with our economists and their team is, what are those businesses that can expand but they're not right now? So we collect that data, we look at what do they need in order to expand, what can we do with the city in order to assist them in doing that, and then those are the ones we target also. How do we encourage them for growth? The trade show thing that I was mentioning there, we still go to trade shows, even though those aren't the most productive, but you know, if you're not there, somebody else will take it, right? So we still go to the trade shows that are appropriate for this particular community. So in that data where we say, you know what, healthcare is one of those areas that's really growing, let's make sure we go to some of those trade shows that we could attract the healthcare industry. So as I said, we start with gathering the data. We have our staff economist puts together all that information. We identify the targets, whether it's attraction, expansion, or retention. We turn those over to our team. We generate leads. We do that by targeting those folks. We do that by sending out that information. We also collect leads. We're a member of the California Central Valley EDCs, so those are the 8 counties, and I know you had asked if we're looking at our partners. Being a part of that particular group, and we meet monthly, we can see what other folks are doing, and they're sharing. They're sharing what they're doing. So we're always looking at what's happening in Visalia, because I lose a lot of businesses to Visalia. What's happening as far as home building in Madera, right? And if they're building new homes in Madera and people are moving there, are the businesses going to go there too? So we do that analysis at the same time. What is it that we need to be doing? Then we acquire our clients. We build and maintain those relationships. I have 6 people who, that's all they do, is they work with the group at the City of Fresno, and they go out and meet with people all day, every day. We do site selection, business incentives, workforce resources, marketing, and growth assistance. We meet once a month or twice a month? Twice a month with the City of Fresno team, so we can share information back and forth. What is it that we're doing, we need their help, and what are they doing that they need our help on? So that targeted outreach. We look at, and this is for the expansion retention group, and really this is expansion now. We do look at who has the greatest potential for growth. And that doesn't mean that we ignore those small businesses that might only be growing with 1 or 2 people. We still look at those. We still see how those folks want to grow and how we can help them. But we do have businesses that they've been in business for 50 years and they still have the same employees they've always had, but maybe if they had some more incentives, they could add 10 or 12. And what would that look like? And so we do that analysis. Our staff economist does the predictive model on employment. What does that look like? If they're expecting to grow, what can we do to help? If they're just expecting decline, what is it we need to do to prevent that? We follow the City of Fresno, coordinate focus engagements along local businesses poised for growth. So we have meetings with our businesses. We invite the City of Fresno to come with us to those meetings so that we know what direction we need to go in. So in 2018-19, these were just new business leads that were appropriate for the City of Fresno. There were 52 that we brought in last year, worked directly with the staff to ensure that we were answering every single one of those leads. We probably had 172, but these were ones that we actually had areas that we could respond. So we had property available, we had the workforce available, and we were able to respond to those. So far, and just to date, we have 18 new leads that we're working on. And these are, the 2 that we listed here are just brand new, so we wanted to tell you about the 2 new ones. And this was from, anybody who works in economic development, you know that it's a long process. So I started working, and just to go back, I started working with Ulta in 2016, maybe 15. It took years for them to be able to come around and say, this is the direction we want to go in. This was a company that we did targeted outreach in 2018 because we understood they could grow. If they closed down in another state, and as much as I love this country, we would love to steal their business and bring them here into the City of Fresno. So we talked to them about if they closed that facility in that other state, here's what we could offer them. We had the city of Fresno put together a whole packet for us to say, here's what you could get if you close that one down and come here. And they're getting ready to consolidate right now. They're going to have the first week that they open, which should be soon, they're going to have 83 new blue-collar manufacturing jobs at $55,000 average. They're also going to be bringing in some high-level administrators when they open up in those first few months, and those are $150,000, $180,000 jobs. So that's one that we've been working on with the city for a long time. I think lately they've been meeting daily on what it is that we need to do in order to close that deal. We have another company, it's an e-commerce. And sometimes we think about those e-commerce centers as Ulta and Amazon, right? They're 1 million square feet and, we need thousands of acres. This is a 200,000 square foot building, but they're gonna bring in 70 new positions right away. $16 an hour to start at the lower level. They have managers at $25, $26 an hour, and those are the two newest ones that we've been working on. And I think that's you. Okay.
So, thank you, Leanne. I'm going to open up for questions for this section. I have a quick question for you, Leanne. So you represent the entire county, and I know as we look at some of the objectives here, has the city of Fresno actually given you an economic development strategy for finding new industry and businesses to come to this area based on our new general plan? What are you specifically looking for that reflects our adopted plan?
Right. So I don't know that we can say the city of Fresno tells us what direction to go in.
They don't tell you, but a part of the general plan was about developing economic strategies around our plan. Have you been given those strategies? That was an important part of it.
Well, I think the strategies, we haven't been given those strategies, but we've been working on those strategies together, right? So out of that general plan, here's what that looks like. Here's the industries that we were looking at. Here's the focus that we have, and certainly we got that from them. Absolutely, here's that direction we need to go in. And I think one of the questions that came up earlier is sometimes those things change over 5 years, right? So where it used to be that those industries that we were targeting, those strategies that we were using, we're tweaking those as we go along, certainly, because the economy has changed in the last 5 years and the direction has changed. But we've been working on those things together, and those are certainly things that the city of Fresno has given to us as part of this contract.
So one of the strategies here is the Economic Development Progress Report that is given annually and biannually. Is that your organization, or is that staff that does that? Who provides that to the administration?
So we have our...
Right, but you're your own. So
Yes, we we give that to them. We have what we have done and how we match what their strategy is. So we give them a report. Actually, I give them a report once a month. And then we also give a year-end report. And I'm sure that's what you put in your report, correct?
Presentation to the council as well.
Yes, we do a presentation to the council, yes, every year.
Is there any additional questions for Leanne before I bring staff back up for questions? Please, patience.
Hi, Leanne, thanks for being here.
Sure.
So do you have a set of assumptions that you make? There's a multiplier factor, for every job. There's a way to figure out what are the ripple effects in the economy. And I would love to know, I'm sure it's available somewhere. This is a data request. I would love to see for Amazon and Ulta Beauty, I would love to see that cost-benefit analysis. We forewent as a city these fees. We agreed to not, whatever the tax incentives, benefits were, we gave, this was our give, and this is what came back to us. And I'm particularly interested in how, one of the goals of the policies here is that new industry should not exacerbate our environmental problems.
Right.
So, I don't know, all that PM 2.5, it's just hard to imagine how that gets mitigated, and that's one of those externalities that gets offloaded to the public at large, and particularly the neighborhoods that live in the vicinity of these projects. So I'm really interested to see that whole analysis and see how these goals and policies got, how they were used, if they were. Like, what were the criteria? What was the multiplier factor? All of that. And like, so maybe we could see that, because it's, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Jennifer, I believe that the administration presented to council the return on the investment on those tax subsidies to those two projects. So you're asking that you see those numbers, correct?
Actually, not just the tax subsidies, but also all of the analysis.
The analysis.
That would lead a reasonable person to conclude that this is actually a good thing for the entire community. And including the range of salaries and all of that. And the environmental impacts.
Okay. I'm looking at, did everybody get that over there? Okay. Yes, please.
Leanne, can you, I don't know if you can or not, but if you can you comment on the warehouse that was going to come into downtown, or industrial triangle that went through litigation? What is the status of that? Is that area going through its environmental impact analysis update? And how many jobs do we lose by not getting that? And is there any chance for getting those jobs back?
Well.
Whatever you can comment, I know.
Yes, I can comment without saying the name, yes.
Okay.
So, yes, we had originally 3 very large companies that were looking at a piece of property in that industrial triangle. We had a manufacturing company that was looking at manufacturing electric cars. We had an ag-related manufacturing company, and we had a warehouse e-commerce center for shoes that we all like. The e-commerce center was one that hung in there. The other 2, they're on hold, and not that we've lost them completely, but they're not in the mix at the moment. I don't know if they went someplace else. The one that we do know that went someplace else was certainly that shoe warehouse. And they were going to have, at the very beginning, about 1,800 jobs, maybe 2,000. It was going to be another e-commerce center, a large e-commerce center. They decided, because of the lawsuit and the fact that the governor's office was actually involved in that, that they didn't want to be involved. They found another spot in Shafter, and so we cannot get that one back now.
Any update on the litigation? I mean, not that it's related to general plan, but is that area, I don't know if that's a city question, are we done with that?
We're still working on the EIR and doing the community outreach. The City of Fresno, the EDC, and many other partners have been doing outreach into the community, put together a community plan to move forward. So we're hoping that's going to be done in October, correct? Yes. And there's a meeting next week.
Thank you. Josh.
So first of all, I want to say thank you. Bringing jobs to this community is one of the most important things that we can do. And this may be a question for staff, but going back to one of the slides, there was a 142 plus million increased in funds, and Sal clarified that was over, I think, a period of 4 or 5 years. In my mind, that is broken down into 2 different components. One would be values. I think your slide showed that there's a $28 billion increase in property values, and since property taxes are ad valorem, I would assume that that helped increase property tax revenue for the city. The other part of that is growth, right? And what I'm more interested in is when we're in an expanding market today, values are increasing, the unemployment rate is at an all-time low. So I'm not really interested in the all boats are rising together. What I am more interested in is what items of growth due to the previous general plan that have been implemented led to that growth specifically. So not the existing, but the growth. And the reason I'm asking that, and maybe for you, Leanne, or Lupe, or the staff, is that question of how are we doing? Well, by implementing the general plan and seeing this growth, whether it's in jobs or these other areas, you know, I'm more interested in that question, how are we doing, and what are the metrics that we're doing to compare? Are we going to get an analysis today, or at least staff be able to address that? And one of my questions is, I can submit questions ahead of time, but without the presentation to maybe have this context and develop those questions, I'm going to need some follow-up, or it's probably not worth it to me. So. Did everyone understand my question? So my question is, out of all the increase in revenue over the last 5 years, when we're measuring this general plan and the success of it, I'm saying some of that is static, just based on increased values. And I'm not really interested in that because the market's expanding. What I am interested in is how much of that is based on changes that the general plan made to increase the growth and the success of the city. That's my question.
So in conferring with our subject matter experts at the table, they do not believe that we would be able to break that out.
So how can we measure the success of the general plan if we can't measure what's contributing to the success of the city?
So you know, and I understand that there are going to be things that are a result of normal growth in the economy, but what I can tell you, and we did review the 142 million in increase in revenues. That's total revenues to the city, not general fund. That's total revenues. While that increased, the city was able to then spend another $108 million in expenditures, an increase in expenditures to improve service levels that were expected in the general plan, such as additional firefighters, police officers, bus service, improved infrastructure, and it was able to set up an emergency reserve to ensure fiscal sustainability. So in terms of meeting the objectives, we don't think that there's a way to break out specifically because you adopted this general plan, this one business did better, therefore their revenues were higher, therefore their taxes were. There's not a way that we can break that out.
I totally understand, but maybe we can simplify it a bit, and maybe we could look at correlations. One would be sales tax revenue. The sales tax revenue for the city increased by what? And then why, right? What businesses came into the city? What were income levels? What jobs did we create? And then my first question was, how did our neighbors do? How did we compete? I think there's some simple things that we can look at because all of those were part of the goals of the general plan, right? Whether it was education, quality of life, job creation, downtown, et cetera. So we're gonna have to, if we're going to criticize, critique, improve this general plan, we need to start making some correlations of this data over the last 5 years, and I need to have some.
So we might be able to break some of that down geographically, but we'll look at it and we'll talk about it. We are not allowed to go down to a specific business level and say,
I'm
Mrs. Smith's pies generated X number of tax dollars. I can't do that. But we could potentially look geographically at certain areas, but I'm gonna need to we'll put that down as a potential data source, and we'll talk internally about whether or not that's able to be broken out.
I saw we did have data on jobs, right? So we can see the correlation of jobs then and now. We do have unemployment data. We do have sales tax revenue data. And so I think as we start to look at these, not down to the specific business, I don't think I appreciate what Darius asked about certain businesses not coming in. That's important, but the general plan is more broad than that, right? So I'm looking for, how did this general plan perform over the last 5 years, and what added to the success of the city on a higher level? I'm not trying to get down into the detail, but I think we need some details to see, okay, is this working, is this not working?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please. Hi, Keith.
I really appreciate this line of inquiry, and I appreciate being here tonight. One of the things I wanted to bring up is probably pages 220 and beyond, where it starts to talk about the relationship between land use and the fiscal condition of the city, which begins to speak to some of Josh's points. I think we can measure some of these impacts in a spurious way, or we can actually look at a fiscal impact model that really talks about the types of development we have in Fresno, could be compared to another city, the location of that development, the level of services being provided, and the rates and fees that we're getting back. So for example, some business models we've seen out in the general public, might be a tech company, for some period of time, they can produce a product and sell it below cost of recovery to somehow build a market. A city can't do that very long. Neither can a residential home builder. And I think we don't know what these costs are. We have not done a fiscal impact assessment of this general plan, which was called for in the general plan. It really does need to look at new annexed land and the cost of servicing that land in perpetuity, not as a transaction, but in perpetuity. There's models for this. It's referenced in this document many times. There's a supplement that we sent out. And I think if we really are going to talk apples to apples here and really measure real impacts, then we probably need to start talking about a fiscal impact assessment and what goes into that, and start talking about some of the elements of that, because some of these other variables may be spurious and specious, in fact, to a real assessment of the impact of the policy structure we have. So I would just lay that out, and I want to be an advocate to follow what's in this plan to the extent that we really start to make assessments. And I feel like that's a missing ingredient here for the kind of measurement we're all looking for.
Agreed. Jeff?
There's I counted 24 policies in this section that have to do with economic development, and there's a dozen or so of those commentaries. I assume that, number one, the commentaries don't really apply. They're not policy of the city. They're strictly that in their commentary. So my question is, if we don't challenge or question or change any of those policies that are there, do they just ride? Do they just stay there and become part of the next general plan update? Or is it up to us to actually make a list and address those now?
I believe our charge is to make a list, to make recommendations, and they go in the hopper for conversation for the council and the council and the administration. To make a decision. I hear everybody about the data, right? We're asking to be making recommendations without solid data. That's a big concern. So I think, Keith, we're going to have to lean on you and staff the best we can to do what we can. I think that we're in a unique universe without information. I mean, we're relying on you, Leanne, which is great, but we still don't really know how that's being implemented at the city level. You're not a city employee. You kind of provide guidance and industry expertise, but there's that internal data we don't have yet. And I think that's going to be a big concern for us that we probably need to address with the administration on this. Yes, Patience. Oh, were you done, Jeff? Yes. Okay.
I just want to be sure I understood Jeff's question. Yeah. If we recommend changes to the general plan, and there are changes to more than 2 of the elements in the general plan, then that triggers a whole bunch of additional things that are going to need to be done. So my understanding is that unless we recommend changes, this general plan is going to be what it is. I mean, we can recommend changes, but unless the city council decides to actually do it. So I guess I would want us to be alert to the whole range of consequences to making changes. And I want to strongly second what Keith just said. That's exactly the kind of information I'm looking for. That's exactly the measure of how are we doing. We thought this was going to happen. We made this general plan with this intention. Now, did it come out like that, or has it gone sideways in some other direction? Yeah.
Did you have a question? Or?
Well, I just wanted to clarify whether you're asking, are we going to put into the hopper potential changes, or are we going to recommend that this be retained and this thing be different? I mean, I'm assuming that there are going to be a relatively few number of changes. On the other hand, if what we're assuming is there's going to be a major rewrite, then the question is, what do we retain?
Well,
does that make better sense?
Yeah, there's a bunch of chapters here, a bunch of elements to this general plan. There happens to be 24 policies in this first chapter. I can't remember how many there are throughout this plan. There may be hundreds of policies, but I think each and every one of them ought to be looked at, and we ought to say, is it still valid today, to Josh's point, or is it something that we ought to modify or eliminate completely? For instance, the issue of homelessness is not dealt with very strongly in this general plan. And 2 general plans ago, it wasn't mentioned. I think it's a pretty big deal today that somewhere we're going to have to address that in this general plan. So that, we may be asking for big changes.
Daniel?
Hey there. I appreciate Jeff's note because I had that in my notes that I was feeling a little insecure about, for recommendations. So can we come up with a straightforward framework for how we're going to, like, if we're going to go policy by policy, just to say how we're going to look at this? Because I, in going, like, my approach kind of to this, I felt like I was biting off more than I can chew and spinning, and I try to break it down, just look at each policy and say, okay, is the policy itself, like, does it set itself up to be, like, clearly measurable in the first place? Because some of the things are worded kind of vague, and there's no performance standard, to borrow my friend Mariah's terminology, which totally makes sense. And some are, but there is kind of this, like, it feels like there's this data gap. I mean, we're all relatively interested people here, and it sounds like we're all kind of at a loss for really how we're doing. And I think that that's on the city to go forward to make sure that there's, I mean, it's tough work, but to make sure there's more, like, public-facing information about our implementation of this plan. And I'll wrap it up, just like coming up with some criteria that we can all buy in on, saying, is it still valid? Has there been changed circumstances, or are things still substantially the same that we can hold on to it? Whether the policy itself, as written, is something that, like, is clearly effectively measurable, or if it leaves a big gap that we can't, make a fair call on it. And then maybe, some kind of report on the level or the degree that the policy has been implemented, like some kind of just something like that.
Yeah, so I feel we had this conversation with the Planning Commission. The implementing policies are more like guiding principles, right? They're guiding principles because some of them are not going to necessarily be measurable. So a
Why do they say implementing then? Because
I got it, right? I got it. I know that we could get.
Thank you for acknowledging that.
Regional collaboration. Yes. Well, you can measure that, depends on the methodology, right? So it's more of a guiding principle, but it says implementing policies. So I think some of them are going to be difficult to measure. I wish I had a better answer for you.
I think that's fair. Some of the policies, or some of the implementing policies, I think are totally valid to have in here. Right. And maybe it's okay to just acknowledge, like, hey, there's going to be a problem tracking this, as a data unit or something. And it might be something more like, okay, do we have enough buy-in? Like, will EDC show up and say, yeah, we've been given a strategy, like a directive by the city, to implement the general plan, versus, we're kind of doing our own thing.
So I think we're here, maybe Drew or Jennifer could jump. We're here because a particular council member, let's get back to why we're here. So council members expressed some concerns that we were losing market share in terms of housing development, business development in terms of we're not being really a business-friendly community, that we are shunning businesses away because we take too long, housing starts aren't where they were, that maybe our economic assumptions were too optimistic, we're not growing as fast as we were, why are people going to Clovis? So all of these little bit of concern, all of those concerns are large. That forced the council to give a very broad perspective on how we look at the general plan. I think they probably had 4 or 5 major concerns, but we've been asked to look at the entire document, right? So I think that chapter 2, these objectives, I take them as guiding principles. Some people take them as policies because ready-to-go sites. That's a guiding principle to me, not a policy, right? So I want to make sure we kind of get through this. I hear you. Where we could get data, we need to get data. And I think the fiscal impact and the analysis is really key. Are there any other questions to this? Yes, please.
Thank you. I just want to return to something that Patience mentioned regarding if we make changes to more than one element of this, there are a number of different requirements that are going to kick in.
Yep.
The most important of which is probably SB 1000, which is the requirement to put a environmental justice element and environmental justice policies throughout the general plan. So question/comment is, if we're considering making changes, then we should probably be analyzing all of this with an eye towards that also being in here. And that will make a difference on how we analyze things like industrial development, zoning, the way that we attract businesses, what kinds of businesses are we attracting, where are we putting them? Because all of that is required by the environmental justice element, which also requires the city to intentionally invest specifically in disadvantaged communities and gives quite specific requirements, not really vague, it's very specific. So in order to not set ourselves up for failure later, I will probably be pointing out throughout this where policies will potentially conflict with those
Sure.
legal requirements.
Sure.
So that's just something to keep in mind, because we might get to the end of it and say, well, oh snap, we recommended all these things, turns out now we've triggered this and we have to go back and reconsider these policy changes.
Yeah. So I think we're making recommendations that we're not sure that people will adopt or will accept, but we're here to offer recommendations regardless of how drastic they may be. We're going to leave that to the administration and the elected officials to decide. So Mariah, I hear you. I think I don't want us not to put something on the table because we're afraid of what it might trigger. That's not our jurisdiction. So if it's going to trigger something that needs to be triggered because we all agree it needs to happen, then we're going to let the legislative body debate that and decide what direction they want to go. I don't want us not to talk about it because it's going to trigger something. I want us to talk about it, include it, and then let the legislative body decide, right?
Right. I think more of what I'm trying to say is not to not consider things because of what they might trigger,
Right.
but to analyze it as if the triggers are going to happen, right?
Okay.
Because if we're going to make recommendations to city council and the recommendations that they could choose to approve, if we don't know if they're going to approve them or not,
Right.
but say they do, and we haven't done an analysis of how that would then intersect with new legal requirements, they're left without really having a pathway forward or recommendations forward on how to address those specific requirements that are now going to be involved. So
Well,
I
now-
think we should just kind of have it all in mind
Okay.
as we're doing this, and as we're thinking about policies, especially with SB 1000, as well as the climate change requirements, be thinking about whether or not the recommendations that we're making, whether they're taken up or not, could potentially run into those challenges. And I think we should have an eye towards things that are going to be able to fly one way or another, or at least be easier to pass one way or another without modification.
Sounds fair. Thank you, Darius.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I agree with your comments. We should look at all aspects, including environmental justice and economic impacts. I mean, that's what we're here. We're investing a lot of our time to, we want to have honest feedback about economic impacts, social justice, impacts, environment. We need to address all of it. Otherwise, what are we doing here? If we're not going to recommend any changes, I mean, yes, we need to know what the consequences of those are, but we need to have honest dialogue about and get the data, what's working, what's not working, and what we recommend to the legislative body for their decision making.
Mr. Chairman?
Please, and then.
Could I ask that SB 1000 that staff bring that and kind of review that with us at a later meeting so we can be familiar with it? Because I'm not.
I think Eric did a presentation of it. The OPR rep did a pretty good analysis, and it might be in our USB as well.
Oh, make sure you turn your mic.
Is
so
it
we can
not
record
on?
it.
I'm just not speaking into it.
So
I
the
apologize.
presentation that he did at the last meeting, correct?
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
And it might be in the OPR guidelines
I
too.
remember the discussion, but I didn't realize that it would trigger. We would not trigger, right?
Yeah, it's any two elements being updated after, now.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to, are there any other experts that we're supposed to hear from
Yep,
tonight?
we're going to move on.
I want to take
We're gonna-
advantage
Yep.
of
I
them.
have a quick clarifying
All
question.
right, so I'll ask, we're going to do one more question, then we're going to move on to the next.
Yeah, no, it's just more so, given that this was like a 2014, 2015 general plan and, 2024, 2025 is, in the near horizon, does the city plan to do that, update according to the recommendation? And if so, like, what's the time frame of that? Because I'm only asking because, like, if that's going to be done soon, I feel like it may be costly for us just to update a couple of elements versus, hey, we're going to revamp it, we're going to start those conversations within the next year. We can start those recommendations of existing policies to improve those, and then kind of put them in a bike rack so we can continue those when we're actually doing that full analysis and the update, rather than, spending, being fiscally responsible and not re-spending, the very minimal dollars we do have.
Sounds good. All right, moving on. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a question.
What's that?
It was a question.
Oh, all right, she's going to answer the question then. There you go, Drew.
Sorry. Go ahead, Drew.
The goal was to review the general plan every 10 years.
Okay. So when would that start? Sorry, Drew. Would that be in, when would workshops start, or when would staff start discussing that?
That's yet to be established.
So I'll try to hurry up and finish up for you.
You're fine. We'll try to get
I
less
do have
excited
some
for
graphs,
you.
and hopefully it won't give you all your answers, but it'll kind of give you a brief overview. So, okay, so in here, the objective here, obviously it's been up for a little bit, so support local businesses, startups, encourage innovation by improving access to resources, capital, help overcome obstacles hampering economic development. So on that, we, as Leanne had stated a little bit ago, we do job creation. We focus on job creation, just diversification, creating entry-level, medium, and high-wage jobs in a diversified economy so that we can protect our economy against single industrial vulnerabilities. This means attracting new businesses, building skills pipelines so that they can fill the jobs that locals, fill their jobs with local hires. So we do try to focus on doing that. So this next slide is just, again, some of the programs that we talked about briefly, explaining about some of the things that the city has tried to do to improve and save folks money. Time is money, obviously. So with the current general plan, it allows, one of the things it does allow is by right development. And now with the FASTER program, you can submit your applications online to hopefully expedite it versus coming into the office. And then, of course, they've also installed the money-back guarantee program. And and then there's some others that are listed there. And then, although we didn't have anything to do with Bitwise, we've definitely supported them and helped them with some of their building plans to get them processed. The others that have followed because of Bitwise, it's been attracted is the Pie Shop. And then some of our other partners that help us out a lot with a lot of the programs or projects in there that need funding is Access Capital. CENTCAL actually facilitates the city's revolving loan program to help small businesses move forward should they need some money. And then Fresno Pacific University is one of the others that has a social enterprise academy, so they help get some of those students into entrepreneurship. And then recently the New Vision Aviation that Joe Odom has been doing to bring electric airplanes that Keith's talked about quite a bit. And over there they have a flight school training. One of the things that we found out recently, and many of you may know, is we're losing a lot of pilots because of their aging. They at a certain age, they're done. They can't fly anymore. So, that's another sector that we can go after. And we've got actually an organization here in Fresno at Chandler that does the training. So hopefully we can hook up with them and help them start attracting some of our young kids to that. And this just has a little bit of a chart that the planning department gave me that we stuck in there for the money back guarantee program, just listing since its inception, the number of applications they've done, and you can kind of take a look at that, and we can provide that in further detail if you want it. Unless somebody else wants to comment on it. And then again, I mentioned earlier that Claire is here to help us with our opportunity zones projects. So she came in and she has worked diligently to put the prospectus together for the city of Fresno and the county of Fresno. So this opportunity zone prospectus will be going online shortly, probably within the next couple of days, if not sooner. And look forward to it. We can provide you with the link so that you can get on there if you have projects that fall into the census tract for that. That is definitely a program that helps, was designated to help some of our disadvantaged neighborhoods, okay? And then, let's see. We talked a little bit about the tax increment financing. So just this past week, Councilmember Esparza worked with, has kind of taken this program on to look at the feasibility analysis to look at some other programs to help pay for some infrastructure financing. And let's see, I think, and then to help with some of the infrastructure that we need, and all of that aligns perfectly with our opportunity zones. And let's see, where are we now? Sorry, my voice is leaving me. So then again, here's the third objective that we have been working with: attract and recruit businesses and offering incentives for economic development. And actually, I think I jumped a page. So as Leanne described earlier, the city participates along with the EDC to create and nurture leads as well. We do marketing outreaches as they do research. We work directly with the individual companies to find them locations and coordinate between the various agencies. And then some of the incentives that we have that we provided are what our mayor put in with our various incentives under our Economic Expansion Act. And I know yearly our Public Works sends a report to council and does a presentation on how many incentives or impact fee waivers there were, if there were any. And so we can probably gather some of that information for you and the projects that benefit from it or took advantage of it. So again, it's the ID for, that's impact fee waivers for industrial, and we also have it for mixed-use development for housing, so it's not just strictly industrial. So there may be some projects that, because they're meeting the guidelines of the Economic Development Act, that will be able to take advantage of that. Okay, and then PG&E also, the city worked really closely with PG&E to help make Fresno more attractive by implementing a 25% reduction to businesses that are at risk of leaving California. So if they're actually looking at other sites in California, PG&E will put that program together. And then the governor has other incentives that helps businesses that are looking to expand, and that will help them with their expansion, which is the California Competes. They have new employment credits and also benefits of sales and use tax credits for manufacturers. And then we also have hub zones here in Fresno and foreign trade zones. And here are some of the lists that they mentioned, and we kind of took it and put the number of jobs that were created. I know that when these agreements went to council, there were some metrics that were put there, and if they didn't meet it, they didn't bring in the jobs, they don't get the incentive. So they didn't get it outright. It's as they go along and meet those deal points that were put together. So that's something to consider. Okay. And then we kind of listed, let's see. So it's not all just big, large companies. You can see there's smaller companies as well.
For clarification, the investments are the investments from the company, or that's not our investment?
That's the total investment.
Total investment between us and then
for
the private sector?
For the project,
Okay.
yes. Okay. And then just pictures
She's almost done, yeah.
of some of the projects that were on that list, and ribbon cuttings. So Bitwise, of course, and then you've got the Gap and Amazon, I believe. And then other relocation successes that we've worked with EDC and others is Universal MedTech. While they're not a large company and they didn't come from another, they actually came, as you mentioned, about what are other communities doing. They were in Tulare and they decided to move over here. Not a lot of jobs, but they needed to be here to be more successful. And then again, this other company, the next one, they were from Santa Rosa. And they were part of, if I'm not mistaken, weren't they at the Food Expo? And that's kind of where they began and decided to come here to Fresno. So, and then another one that the EDC and we are working on is Sarah, and they're actually coming from Atlanta to Fresno, right? And she could speak more to that if you have questions. So again, this past year, as I mentioned, we worked with the Manufacturing Alliance, and they actually put some graphs that we got from them, and in there it shows how the U.S. is doing as far as growth in manufacturing jobs, how California is doing, and look at what Fresno's done. People don't realize, look at how actually well we're doing. It's actually gone up. When we went to the conference last year, I believe it was a little bit lower. Yeah, it was a little bit lower. So I'm happy to see that it's now going up even further. So if that helps any.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, I didn't know that. When I went, I was like, I think a lot of us were surprised when the guy talked about it. So that was really, I think, good news for us. We're doing something right? So again, another baby of ours that I know I personally helped was with the UCSF school that's currently downtown, that's over by Community Hospital. We help assemble some of that land and help with that construction. And I was happy to find out recently that they are looking to expand. They are, really just growing. And so they actually want to start working on, hopefully, a medical school. And I know many of you may have heard that they're looking to get some more funding so that they can do that. And that's great jobs. I mean, they've got some, if you can see there, the number of training physicians that they're doing here in the San Joaquin Valley, their program they have there, and the state budget that's looking to hopefully allocate $15 million to not just the school here in Fresno, but throughout the state. And we need those. That's the other area that we're lacking, right? We all know we need more doctors here, and so. And, oops. So the last one here, let's see, is it last?
Second last.
So we're going to go. So again, another objective, cultivating a skilled, educated, and well-trained workforce by increasing educational attainment and the relevant job skills at levels in order to appeal to the local and non-local businesses. They almost sound like the same stuff over and over, but it really is just ongoing outreach and training. So to help fill that, guiding principle, as Carrie said, is working with our local educational. So if some of you don't know, we've got a few of our community schools that are providing training to our high school students. And those kids are grades 9 through 12. Currently, CTEC is one that we reached out to just to kind of get some numbers for you. They have currently 162 students. They started, I think, towards the end of 2018, so this is their first year. They don't have any graduates yet, but it's good to see that they've got that amount. And that's just one school. You got Gatewise that's trained students, and then on with some of our other organizations. And of course, we work closely with workforce development constantly, all three of us, EDC as well as ourselves, to make sure that they're helping us when people get laid off. They go to them, help train them, help get them skills. So there's some information there for you as well. And then EDC has their NEO program, and Leanne can talk more about that one, if she would like.
So some of you probably heard the story. At about 5 years ago, I was out trying to bring a new business to town, and they said, well, you don't have a trained workforce. We can't bring them here. And so I happened to be at a conference, and the then Department of Social Services director was there, and they went to him and said, so how many people do we have on welfare right now that would be looking for jobs? And he said, about 13,000. And I said, I have a company that needs 250 people that we can't find, and you have 13,000 people that are receiving services, and somehow we haven't tied that together ever? And he said, no. And so we went out to dinner, and after 2 glasses of wine, we came up with this wonderful program. So that's how it works, right? That's how we do it. So the NEO program is a combination of businesses coming to the table and the needs of the participants, the workforce. So what they do is the company tells us, here's what I need. And I collect that information, we put it into our website. The Department of Social Services has the workforce put in their resumes, everything that they can do. It automatically, it's a dating website, it automatically matches them up, sends that information to that company and says, here's your 250 that match that. And then we make sure that they can interview them, that all the paperwork is done. So right now, and then if you hire them, here's the good thing about that part, if you hire them out of that program and you're a business, for the first 3 months, you get 100% of that person's salary reimbursed. Because we know they need additional training. We know sometimes they need additional help in order to get through this process. And so that company agrees to do that, and they get 100% of their salary reimbursed. For the next 3 months, they get 75% of their salary reimbursed in the anticipation that they're going to keep them on long term. And what we do in this process is we stay with them through the entire process. And that's what wasn't done before. What wasn't done before, when I asked the Department of Social Services, so when you place people with businesses, how long do they stay? Guess what they told me? We don't know. I said, so do they come back and you put them back in the system? We don't know. Are they rising up in those businesses? Are they getting raises? Are they getting additional training? We don't know. So with this process, what I said was, we'll do this project with you, but we have to have that retention piece in there. So we have retention specialists that are on staff, and they follow them for 1.5 years. And they follow it through the business. So that way, when the business hires folks, and they come and tell us, man, John never comes to work on Fridays. And this has been going on for 3 months, I can't keep him anymore. What we do is we take that information back to social services and said, I think maybe John has transportation issues on Friday. What can we do to keep them? So we keep those retention numbers in order to make sure that those people are staying in the job, that they're getting the jobs, but they're staying in the jobs. We have 311 businesses right now that are participating, and they're continuing to hire people out of this project. 1,620 people hired through the project. And I know this one's yours. Still me? Okay. We've been working with Career Tech, looking at making sure that we go all the way down into the high schools to get people ready. That's one of the things we work with the State Center Community College also, doing dual enrollment. We want to make sure that the people in Fresno are getting the jobs, and if you're talking about what's that return on our investment, right? Let's make sure the people are getting the jobs that are here as we bring in new business. And I think somebody asked the question about how do we ensure that we're doing this right and that we're bringing the right businesses here? The City of Fresno and the EDC, actually, we came up with a checklist. And when we're targeting businesses, not just collecting them, when we're targeting them, we go through that checkoff list. Are they going to be good partners? Are they looking at the environment? Are they going to hire our local people? Those are the things that we have on that checklist in order to go out and get people to come here. And some of those, are they willing to work with our schools? Are they willing to work with our Department of Social Services? So, you know, one of the things I forgot to mention to y'all is we've been working really closely on foreign direct investment in ensuring that we're going around the world and bringing people to Fresno County. They pay more. They are good partners when we're looking, because they're doing that in their own countries. When I went to Germany and they were talking about social justice, right? And what are they doing there in order to ensure that their local people are being taken care of as they grow businesses, as they train people for those jobs. those companies that we're bringing from out of the United States are really great partners. So we've been focusing really heavily on making sure that people around the world know about the city of Fresno and the things that we're doing here. And I know Lupe said I'm probably going to clear the room here by saying this, but I just got back from China. But I'm good. I'm all good.
When did you get back?
I got out just in time. You guys all hugged me. I forgot to tell you. No, I've been back long enough. I'm good. I'm all good. I'm not the carrier. But one of the great things, and the reason that I was in China, is because, yes, we're partners locally. We are partners on a regional basis, so we're partners with all 8 counties of the Central Valley. We're partners in the state of California through Team California. We're partners with the federal government through Select USA, making sure that people around the world want to come to the United States still, and particularly California. But we are, here in Fresno, we were just selected to be part of the California-China International Trade Network, and there are only 5 places in all of California that are in that network: San Francisco, Sacramento, Los Angeles, San Diego, and Fresno. And Fresno was selected to be part of that because of all the wonderful work that we're doing here in making sure that we're bringing the right people here, but also because of the ag tech, the new ag tech that we're working on. And the people in China are really interested in bringing some of their ag tech here and sharing ours. And so that's why I went there, to visit with them. I was supposed to actually go to that particular area that I didn't go to, thank heavens, but I was in Shanghai, and I met with 18 different companies in Shanghai that were interested in Fresno. Not just California, but we're interested in Fresno. And that is because of all of the work that we're doing here, and we're doing it right. So I wanted to make sure you knew that, and that we are doing that work. Thank you.
Doing great work. So just really quick, one of the other things that I failed to mention on those trainings that they're doing at the school level, at the high school level, is what we are now calling new collar jobs. And those are basically jobs that don't require a 4-year degree, but require training, right, to upskill. So, and then just quickly, Drew mentioned the tax revenue. We put a graph together of the numbers that he had, and it shows it from 2010 up to 2019. Okay, and we can provide that information. So as you can see, pretty much for the most part, the city, as far as its properties tax revenue, has gone up until the economy crashed. And so in 2010 is when you start seeing it go down, and then it goes back up, starting to go back up in 2013. So that'll help a little bit. And then infill housing, I just wanted to list a few of the projects that are kind of already in process, have been permitted. This first one is over at Blackstone and McKinley, that you'll be seeing 80 affordable units and some retail on the ground floor. Cesar Chavez is moving forward with construction over on Kings Canyon and Peach, I believe, and that's moving forward. Again, affordable housing units over there. Granville obviously had multiple projects in downtown that we helped with. There were probably about 600 units and live work. And we have another 600 units in the pipeline, and hopefully we'll begin to turn dirt on some of those as well. And then again, there's potential. We're working with some property owners along the Blackstone corridor to do some units over there, down at Shaw and Glen, and then some others down there. So just kind of letting you know there is some stuff going on. The TOD part of this whole thing is actually working. People are looking at it. So a lot of the kids, especially at the Blackstone, it's right by the college, so we assume, that they'll take advantage of that. So what we ended up doing quickly was, for you guys, was we did a chart, and we were able to get the total number of businesses in each council district. I didn't get an opportunity to break down on the types of businesses, but that is something that we're looking to move forward on. So it kind of gives you an idea of the different districts and how many businesses are in there. And then also...
Can you go back a slide? I think people are still looking.
Okay, sorry.
Just give
It's
everybody
probably
one
not
more
really...
minute. One more minute.
Yeah, I thought
We're
it would have
gonna
been a little bit
squint.
better. Yeah.
Everybody
And then
good? Everybody good? Okay,
So,
we're good for your next slide. Thanks.
and I promise I'm almost done.
It's okay.
And then, I think that one was employees. So total employees by council district. Again, not a breakdown of the different jobs, but at least it gives you the numbers there. Total of 231,825. And then finally, annual sales by council district. Now, these are not the city's numbers. We used ISRI, as we have it down there. So it's not what the city has, but what we pulled from them. Okay? And that's annual sales by district, not broken down to any specific sales, but just totals.
District 3 has the highest number, is that correct?
What's that?
District 3?
Down at the bottom, yes.
Annual sales.
So what I'll end my presentation by just saying the objectives that are in the plan haven't changed for us. None are complete, and none are going away. But I do want to build, I want to personally try to build on the hard work that's been done and what's been accomplished and expand on it. Okay? So thank you.
So don't go too far because I held the questions so we could, so you're not off the hook yet. So Mariah, I think you had a question?
Yeah, my question just relates to when you're making a determination on the jobs that are going to be coming in and the ripple effect that Patience was talking about, do you guys take into consideration the potential of that industry to become automated in the future, and how is that analyzed?
Who wants to take that question? Is that going to be you, Leanne? We're going to give you an office at City Hall.
I do,
Oh,
I say that every day.
I don't want to know
right?
that.
And a parking permit, thank you.
Okay, yes.
We do. And certainly looking at, when I was talking about the checklist, and I was talking about the data collection, those are all things that we look at when we're looking at what kind of businesses that we want to attract. We do that return on investment. I know you asked that question on whether or not that's done. We do that before we do those targeting, and we do look at what does that automation look like. And I can tell you that when we're looking at things like ag-related industries and manufacturing, sometimes those type of businesses, we're looking at 5 years from now and 10 years from now what that's going to look like. Because we can see from around the world what's happening in some of those industries. And certainly some of those warehouse jobs, when we're looking at what they looked like, these are not the warehouse jobs from 10 years ago where people were walking around and pulling things off the shelf. Many of the jobs now are automated, and so what do we need to do in working with our community colleges, with our high schools, in training people for those jobs in order to be able to do it from an automation standpoint. Many of the farming jobs are mechanized now, so we're looking at what does that look like. If we're bringing them here, can we train people in order to ensure that they can continue? And I'll give you a really good example. Sorry, were you going to jump in there? I'll give you a really good example. The Parnagian family with Fowler Packing. They changed recently, and everything that they're doing now is really automated and mechanized, right? And so they came to us and said, you know, we have 200 people that were out working in our warehouse, but now we need to train them in order to ensure that they can keep their jobs. And thank heavens we had already done some of those studies, right, to say what would that look like. And so we were able to bring in the training. They kept, I think of the 200 people that were going to lose their jobs, they kept about 175 that wanted to be trained on those new facilities that they were bringing in, those new computerized processes that they were bringing in. And so we do look at that going forward, and we do look at what's that going to cost us in order to train people if we're bringing in those industries. But the folks that I have on staff now, and some of you have met many of them, Will Oliver, and I think he started this whole thing putting in my head, let's make sure that we're looking at 10 years from now, 20 years from now. Let's make sure that we're doing that analysis on what's that going to cost us, and how do we ensure that the local people get the jobs.
Thanks.
And I just want to follow up on that. We're also doing that with the existing businesses. So as we're going out and meeting with them to see, hey, what are you doing? What do you need? They're telling us, you know what, I'm going to have to shift. I need to do this. I need to, be able to be competitive in my market, and that means becoming automated. So they don't want to let go of their employees. They want to upscale them to move them up so that they can keep them, but they also are becoming automated. So we work with that, and as we're going out with retention, that's one of the questions that's asked as well.
Thank you. I'm going to go back and forth to the side. So Don, you haven't had a question, so
Yes.
please.
Along the same lines, when recruiting new industries and businesses to come here, how carefully do you factor in things like their SRI or their ESG or their HRC scores in terms of bringing in industries here that'll have a positive social impact instead of, are you just looking at the jobs?
No, and as I said, we have that checklist, and 8 years ago, we never had a checklist. And it was during that recession of, and I'll be really honest with you, we'll take whoever's gonna come in our door, right? Because we were so desperate, we were losing so many businesses. We just really wanted to make sure that we could stay viable in order to have people paying taxes. But now we have changed that. I think people have heard me say before, this is not your mama's economic development anymore. We do look at that checklist of making sure that they are good partners, and that as we go down that checklist and you get to a certain point and say, okay, no, that's not one we target.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
I have a couple
Oh,
questions.
and then I'm going to come back.
So I'm gonna try to keep them, I'm gonna try and pick, choose. One very quick one is, could we actually get these graphs broken down by job sector? I think that would be great to see, like how, the industries are being distributed across the council districts, and the revenues are aligning. My other question is, the prior graph where Fresno had a 20% manufacturing rate, it's exciting to see. One question is, like, can we also get that broken down as far as how many of those jobs are providing, say, like $50,000 jobs a year, a year, like living wage salaries with benefits, and how many of those jobs are also coming from the local communities of where they're being placed at the same time. It's exciting to see it. At the same time, I'm also a little bit worried just because it is such a, exponential growth in that relative. And to your point, Leanne, around, the recession, Fresno was one of the hardest hit cities, in California, across the nation, as far as like economic loss or GDP loss, foreclosed homes, all of that. So I'm just worried as far as creating this monolithic economy where we aren't diversifying our sectors, and we aren't investing in the human capital to really kind of withstand another one, because everyone keeps talking about, like, okay, that's it, the next recession is imminent, it's going to be who knows when, it's going to be in the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, is what I keep hearing. I'm not an economic expert whatsoever, but when I'm seeing the companies that we're trying to incentivize are like, to your point, you have this checklist, but at the same time, are those incentives also being targeted towards project labor agreements, working with unions, making sure they're providing living wage jobs with benefits, making sure at the same time that that the private costs are actually equating to the social costs that they're taking away, as far as air quality improvements or worsening, if that's what's happening, and degrading our infrastructure in these communities as well. And so I guess that was just a very long-winded question as far as like how are we like making sure we're looking and creating this, because the Brookings Institute did a really awesome analysis in the Inland Valley as far as like the job sectors and industry opportunities, as far as like where is it that the job market, that the good quality jobs are, and I think they did a very high-level analysis of the city or county of Fresno that was really awesome a couple of years. Yeah, you were there actually. Yeah, it was awesome, and I really enjoyed it. And so I was wondering, like, how are we working with that type of data as well? Sorry.
Okay, all right, so real quick, we are running over, which is fine, but I want to remind people to be patient, so don't leave, stay here. On the data requests, are we clear with what she was asking for? I saw your look, but I want to see if we're clear.
When you're talking about, we have to, how do we say this? I don't know that they'll give us a breakdown on, they can tell us number of jobs or salaries. I don't know that we can get it all broken down, but we can try. We can see what we can do.
Okay.
It may be a little harder just because you're working with a company that doesn't like to disclose a lot of that information. But some of that is required depending on if it's something that we have an agreement with, right?
Thank you.
And we're good, please, clarification, then I'll get to patients.
We are following inclusive economic development. And for those of you who don't know that term, those are the things that we look at, right? When we're looking at attracting those businesses here. It's not just, oh, they have 2,500 jobs, because those might not be the ones that we want here. So in those checklists, those are the things that we go over.
Okay, Patience?
So there are 5 objectives in the economic development portion of the general plan, and only 4 of them did we hear about. The 5th one is fiscal sustainability. So I am just really curious about, like, do we measure that? And if so, how? And is there a template or a mechanism? And what, like, you can send it to us, but I just really would like to understand how we do that. I mean, I see it there, that's good. But our subject matter experts and the information that we got today about how we do that, if we do that, I don't have that part of it, which is what I'm looking for.
So the objective 5 was addressed with the presentation slides that preceded my presentation.
Okay, well, let me ask this. I'm particularly interested in fair and proportional payments, whether that happens or not, properly set fees for fee-based services, fiscal impact analyses. So I get it that generally, yay, we have more money, there's more jobs, property values have gone up, whatnot, but that's not the same thing as making sure that a business that we bring here is paying its fair share, and rather than expecting taxpayers to cover the costs of its doing business here. So, so I'm actually looking for some specific responses to these particular strategies, and in order to accomplish that objective of fiscal sustainability.
So those are great questions, and Drew did talk a little bit about fiscal sustainability as a whole at the beginning. So you were asking about ED5B, so fair and proportional payments require all new residential and commercial development that requires annexation to pay a fair and proportional share of needed community improvements through impact fees, assessment districts, and other mechanisms. The city absolutely requires that. So impact fees are collected, are identified based on where, so what growth area they're in, and those are collected and required for
Unless
all,
they're eliminated or reduced
not
under
for, but there isn't for residential and commercial development.
Well, Lupe had one of the incentive programs
For
was
industrial, correct.
So I'm interested in industrial too. So I guess really what I'm looking at, I'm not expecting you, Jennifer, right now at 8:10 to tell us, to give us the numbers or anything. But what I'm interested in is, what is the system for implementing these parts of this objective? I don't know that there have been fiscal impact analyses. I'm assuming that that can be found in each of the annual reports. I'm not sure. It actually should be associated with any general plan amendment. There should be a fiscal impact analysis. So, if you just send us the links, I'll go look. That's all. I'm specifically, how does this happen?
Yes, absolutely. And so annually, the city does produce a report, and it was part of the December 12th on any kind of impact fee waivers or reductions. Those are specific to certain types of programs. They are, so this says new residential and commercial development that requires annexation. So the ones that Lupe was talking about are infill projects, are specifically disadvantaged neighborhoods. We also have economic, we have the Build Act. We have a number of those, but we will send you that report. And then in terms of fees and fee-based services, we just recently updated all of our fees for all of our programs In particular, the development fees were just updated this year, but we do a regular cycle on that. I can tell you that in terms of the fiscal impact analysis, that is a really good question, but that has not been required. So that's one of the things you can check off your list. It's not being required right now. And then in terms of responsible financial management practices, I do have our budget director as well as our finance director here to talk about those if you're interested to answer questions. We do budget for maintenance, including ongoing operating costs, paying off internal debt. You just heard a little bit about that earlier, building reserves.
Can we go back to fiscal impact analyses? Why is that not required? I mean, it's in the plan, it should be implemented, right?
Yes.
So
I can't answer that question.
who knows the answer?
So Keith?
Well, I appreciate you bringing it up. So there has not been a systematic fiscal impact analysis of the general plan over the last 5 years.
No. She's talking about ED5E. That new proposals requiring a general plan amendment or annexation require that particular proposal to produce a fiscal impact analysis. That's what Patience just asked, right?
And I'm talking about a broader analysis in addition to that, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think the point I would like to make is that there is a model. It was developed as part of the general plan update in 2014 by Economic Planning Systems. It's actually in sync with the modeling that the state of California has done, and they've made a publication which has been handed out to people in 2016. So there are models. We've not actually gone through that kind of model to understand how much growth costs.
But my question
And the revenue
is, why
produces.
not?
Well, I don't know how to answer that, but I want to say that I believe it has to be done. So I was going to say, the observation to me is staff's doing a great job, but they're actually acting in the context of an unfunded mandate. And the mandate is that we actually assess these things for some sort of performance and impact, and that's going to require a number of different tools to answer Josh's questions and other questions were raised, as well as the overall fiscal impact of different development types at different locations with different fee structures and different levels of service. And that has not been systematically addressed since the adoption of this general plan. And we're asked to, in a sense, assess that. So my suggestion, frankly, is that maybe we poll people for the kind of data they'd like to see. I would certainly like to help out with the fiscal analysis piece, and we work with the chair and the vice chair to perhaps approach the city council and say, you got a great staff, but they can't do things without resources, and there needs to be some form of economic analysis that supports this committee's work.
So here's what I would recommend, because part of the resolution, which I know that you all read, that established this committee, it did also say that at the end of this fiscal year, that the mayor would be recommending a budget line item specifically related to the general plan to the city council. If there are specific things that we cannot produce for some reason, right? Or they take too long. They're going to be it would take too long for us to hire somebody and produce it before you're going to give a recommendation. I would say we can't make a recommendation on X because we don't have data Y, right? And we need data Y to make that recommendation. And it's going to cost $50,000 or $500,000 or whatever that is, right? And ask for the city council to do that. We can certainly go back between now and then and ask for additional monies, but I'm not sure that a fiscal impact analysis would be completed before the end of June. And I think, there's certainly ones where you can say, yes, these are being done, these are not being done, and these are things that we need more information. The committee does have a charge of a 1 year, so after June, the city council may have a different direction and say, hey, we're going to get you this information.
Right.
And then you're going to come back and do something else for us.
And therein lies the gap in being able to have the
Agreed.
data analysis that you need.
Agreed. So I think we're going to have things we know that we can do and things that we don't know because we don't have data. And I do think each of you have been appointed by specific council members. I would continue to recommend that you have ongoing dialogue with them after these meetings, let them know how you feel, because we're going to need some additional allocations to do more work, because we're not going to have what we need to make all the recommendations we need. Any other questions? I want to make sure I'm not forgetting anybody. Yes, Mariah.
You may have covered this, but what is the status of the periodic fee studies? There was a long list of things, so I don't remember if that was in that.
Yeah.
So The city updates fees every 5 years, and
We just did it, right?
we just did our development fees just this fall.
Okay, so that's what the study is?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments for staff or questions for staff? Patients?
Just housekeeping, I did not read Drew's, obviously I was late because I was downtown. I didn't read your email well enough. Did I miss the email that set the times for all the other?
Yeah, we just announced it's 9 to 11.
Okay, for all those other days.
Correct, 9 to 11. And City Hall? Is that, what's that?
We will send out a
Yeah,
schedule with
all right, that works. That works.
I promise. Thank you.
We have some homework to do. Is there any? Yes.
Just one thing on the
Yep.
data requests, just to make it a clear, transparent process, we're taking down notes as we go, but just to ensure that we got all of them correct, would you please send us an email? We're going to put all of the requests in a matrix and probably the associated email online so that people can see it. So just to make sure that you're getting the desired request and properly, please send me an email.
Yep. Before everybody goes, for the good of the committee, any other questions or needs from the group? Remember, you have some homework to do. I would ask that if you have questions that you know you want to ask and need information, please email them to staff in advance if you can, so that way we could actually answer some of the questions. Drew, was there another question or comment? Oh, there is? Oh, I didn't go, unoral scheduled communications? Yes? Is that it? Any unoral scheduled?
Mr. Chairman, I do have one, I guess it's a comment.
Please.
And in light of this being called the General Plan Implementation Committee, I think, it seems like we ought to start with Chapter 12 first, which is the implementation chapter. And so maybe you'd consider in your off time moving that chapter up sooner rather than later, because it seems a little bit critical to the purpose of why we're here.
Yep.
And it seems like maybe that, not that I start at the end of the book and read toward the beginning, but I started with chapter 12 to figure out in my studying, and maybe you'd consider that as we move forward.
Any other comments? I'll discuss that with staff. I will tell you that there was some kind of conversation before we go is about everybody putting their concerns on the table early. So as we got to the particular chapters, we were better prepared. I was advised that was not a great idea, so we're not doing that. It doesn't mean that we have to take that advice. So I will talk to staff about rearranging some of the order. I know there is a reason behind it, but if you have any questions for me, I'm just going to give you my number if you don't have it, 355-0751. So if there's anything leading up to the meeting, feel free to call me because I want to make sure we get you what you need. Fair enough? Okay.
355.
0751. I know your number. I won't take your call. Sorry, I'm just kidding. Okay, next meeting, Chapter 3, February 18th. Yes, sir.
One more thing. We gave you guys worksheets. If you've completed them, and you'd like to hand them in tonight so we can scan them, please give them to me on your way out, or you can take a photo and scan them and send to me at a later date. Sound good?
Is that with a question or comment?
Yep, so primarily we're looking for the two sheets, the potential improvements, if you have analysis, but if you have questions, we would love to have those as well.
Can we email them to you?
Yes. Yeah.
Are you going to compile them and publish them at the end? What are you going to do?
Keep record of all this information.
What's written there?
All
What do
right,
you have
folks,
written
good.
there?
February 18th, 9 to 11.
9 to 11, February 18th. Good night. The meeting's adjourned.
Yeah, I tried to keep quiet today, you know, not to cross talks, you know, yeah, no, I actually felt that too. I met up with Ryan.
I was a little worried that we were going to say that every single person.
curious about